What we got here? What's your game of the year so far? Game of the year this year currently, there's no like new games I've played in 2024. The newest game I probably played was like Spider-Man 2 on the PS5, Resident Evil 4. I mean, these are all last year titles. As of right now, I think Final Fantasy has the best shot of being game of the year. If nothing else comes out this year that's really like groundbreaking or defining, I could see the Final Fantasy Rebirth getting that game of the year because man, Final Fantasy VII fans are just being spoiled left and right. I mean, not only do you get your favorite game remade after so long, because that Final Fantasy VII is like the Resident Evil 2 of the Final Fantasy series for a long time. It was one of the most beloved games, early titles in the series, one of the most beloved ones out of them. And for a long time, people have been asking for a remake. You know, before Resident Evil 2 remake came out, and all these new Resident Evil remakes came out, Resident Evil fans, when I say people, Resident Evil fans were clamoring, were on their knees praying to Capcom, the Capcom gods, if they will ever remake Resident Evil 2 in the style of how Resident Evil 1 remake was done. The Resident Evil 1 remake, especially with old school Resident Evil fans, is one of the best remakes for a Resident Evil game. It took everything great about the first game and just improved on it, every single aspect of it. The gameplay, I mean, yes, it's still tank controls, but it is smooth tank controls compared to the very first game, the pixel polygram. Yeah, that first PS1 game. The GameCube remake, way smoother in terms of handling the tank controls. Way smoother. To the point where people wanted that to be Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is a great game. You know, play the old classic Resident Evil 2 game. It's still a great game. The tank controls aren't as clunky as the first game. It's like they improved on them. But it still could be way better in terms of, you know, what the Resident Evil 1 remake showed us. It could be way smoother. And then it had the HD graphics. There wasn't HD at the time of the GameCube, but it was the character models, the settings, the character models, the settings, everything felt photorealistic, especially for the time. I mean, still, compare the classic Resident Evil to the Resident Evil 1 remake. There is a huge visual difference there, you know? So it just creates a whole different vibe, for sure. A different vibe for the better, I should say. And I always wanted to see that look and that feel for the Resident Evil 1 remake be brought to the big screen, you know? Why can't this feel like that on the movie screen, you know? And then when the Resident Evil 2 remake eventually came out, they really brought that realistic, photorealistic, cinematic feel to Resident Evil that I'm like, okay, if they're going to do a live action movie, they're obviously going to do it off of these games because that's what makes the most sense. They look the most realistic, right? But at the time, Resident Evil 1 remake was the shit, man. It still is. I still love Resident Evil. You could still play that right now. If I recommend anyone wanting to get into Resident Evil and they want to start from the beginning, control-wise and story-wise, Resident Evil 1 remake. That's on like the PlayStation, Xbox, PC. It was originally on the GameCube, but now it's basically everywhere, just like Resident Evil 4. But Final Fantasy VII was that game. That was Resident Evil 2 for a long time. Everyone wanted an HD photorealistic remake of that game and different control setup too. Like they wanted the camera behind the character, third person view. You're able to move the camera all around. Like we wanted that freedom with Resident Evil 2 and with Final Fantasy VII. And now we're getting it with Final Fantasy VII. We got it with Resident Evil 2 done perfectly. But now we're getting it with Final Fantasy VII. But with Final Fantasy VII, we're not just getting one game. We're probably getting like 3 to 4 games based off of remaking just one title in this series. That's why Final Fantasy VII fans are so damn spoiled right now, and I wish I was you. You know how amazing it would have been if they're like, hey, we're still coming out with like part 3 of the Resident Evil 2 remake because of how dense the game is. I mean, there's a lot of sections in the classic game that is kind of shortened and cut out in the remakes. And that's not just the Resident Evil 2 remakes. That really happens in Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 4, it happened here and there, but it kind of made up for it because Resident Evil 4 is a great remake on its own while tweaking a lot from the original. That was like a 1% chance that they will succeed, and it succeeded. But I'm still very envious because with Final Fantasy, it seems like they're not cutting anything. We're expanding on everything. That's what it feels like. And this is why we're taking up 4 games to actually remake one title in the series. So that's why I'm so envious of Final Fantasy fans, man. They're really taking the time and really putting their all into this. Square Enix is really putting their all into Final Fantasy, and my gosh, I'm so envious. So envious, man. Man. I feel like if Resident Evil did that, not only would they have a lot of sales, but I think they would increase their player base. Like, because there's a lot of times where I've been interested in playing I've never played a Final Fantasy game. I'm not a fan of the series, and I don't hate the series. I am genuinely interested in playing it, and to know that each title is like totally different from one another, it's kind of an easier pill to swallow. And the one that has intrigued me the most is 7, for obvious reasons. But to know that the remake is like taking so long and is getting such an in-depth it makes me want to go back and play the original, so I can really fully embrace and appreciate everything that they're doing with the 7 remake. So maybe it's going to be some time before I really get into it, but I love how there's like a interest building up in me with 7, especially seeing how much care is going into its remake. So I'm really excited about this. I'm excited for Final Fantasy fans, and I'm excited as a video game fan overall.